slightly late start of this meeting, which is entirely my fault for leaving late and getting stuck behind too many tractors. I would like to begin by welcoming members of the press and public who have joined us today in Wisbech. I'm not sure whether there are any, but anyone who's joined us is very welcome. The Combined Authority allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so feel free to take pictures or tweet during the meeting. Although could I ask that anyone present turns their mobile phones to silent or vibrate while the meeting is taking place. There are no fire drills scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, I will adjourn the meeting and we will move to the muster point, which is down and out at that side of the building. I would like to remind members and officers that the meeting will be recorded. First of all, would the Democratic Services Officer like to report any apologies for absence?
We received apologies from Councillor Mike Davies. He will be substituted by Councillor Renewal, who's on her way. Councillor Chris Seaton, substituted by Councillor David Mason. Councillor Lynn Ayres, substituted by Councillor Ray Bisbee, and Councillor John Nish.
Thank you, and welcome to all our substitutes and to those members who are regular members of the committee. Does any member wish to declare a disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory interest in any of the items being considered today? No? No? Fantastic. Okay, item 1.3 is the approval of the minutes of the meeting on the 14th of June, and we are being asked to confirm these as a correct record. If any member wishes to raise a question on the accuracy of the minutes, could you indicate that now? No questions on accuracy, thank you very much. And then we move to the action log. Are there any comments on the action log? Find my action log. I think there was an updated version of this that came out quite recently, is that correct? Or have I got that wrong? No?
That was the agenda plan.
Right, thank you.
Okay.
Not the action log. Okay, any comments on the action log? No. Okay, thank you very much. We will move on to item the item on public questions, but we have not received any public questions. And then we move on to the agenda plan. So does any of the committee have any comments on the agenda plan? Again, no comments. Any comments on the Combined Authority forward plan? No? Thank you. So the next section of the agenda is part 2 and the reports from the Combined Authority Board. And the first one of those is the Adult Education Budget Reserve Fund and Innovation Fund, which I think is being introduced by Parminder. So Parminder, if you're happy to join us, that would be great. Thank you.
And it's so great to see everybody at this meeting. So the purpose of this report, the report is in 2 parts. So the first part is to seek approval from the Skills Committee for our strategic approach to use of our reserve fund. And the reserve fund has been accumulated through underspends from the first 2 years of devolution. So one of the opportunities of the devolved adult education budget has been the retention of adult education funding that hasn't been used within our local area, as opposed to it going into the national pot. So this is the first opportunity, really, given that we're in the 3rd year of devolution, for us to start looking at what our strategic approach might be to using those funds. So the first section talks about that, and the second section is about the Innovation Fund, which I'll come on to in a moment. So in terms of the reserve fund, this is a key decision because we're looking to allocate more than £500,000 from the reserve. And if you look at the table A, that sets out the strategic approach in terms of the themes and whereby we're allocating the funds. So £500,000 of the reserve we're intending to use for future commissioning of new providers. And given that we're coming towards the third and final year of our initial commissioning, we're not looking to roll forward that commissioning, rather to use this £500,000 to add to that commissioning to make a bigger pot for when we go out to tender. There will be a paper coming to it's on the forward plan for November, which will set out our approach in more detail. And then the second and third strands are very much around how do we use our levers to improve the system, and utilising small amounts of money to facilitate partnership and capacity building amongst our providers. And then the other bit of it is around a small amount for marketing, but the rest is to retain the funding within reserve. I will mention the level 3 bit, because members will note that at previous meetings I've spoken about how we have such a small amount of our AEB investment going into level 3 courses. And so we want to hold an amount of money that we can use to stimulate the expansion of that provision by rewarding providers who invest in their capacity and over-deliver on level 3. So that's the approach to the reserve. The only other thing to note on reserve is that the figure that we're quoting for 2020-21 academic year is a forecast, because the final claim won't come in until November. But the figure is based on historic delivery. And then the second bit of the paper is for members to note our approach to our innovation fund. So you'll recall that previously the Skills Committee approved that £500,000 would be set aside to be used as an innovation fund from our recurrent devolved budget. And the paper talks about the themes under which we'll be calling for proposals from providers. And this year, the main focus is around employer responsiveness, and how can we get the system to be much more responsive to employers, given that we're coming out of recovery, and some of the acute skills shortages that we're seeing in our economy. So that's it from me. Are there any further questions from members?
Thank you, Liz. Feel free.
Thank you, Parminder. A really interesting paper, as always. There's just 2 or 3 things which I'd just like to clarify, if I may. Looking at page 2021, first of all, may I say how delighted we are that although we're East Cambs, that we've actually got the apprenticeship hub coming to Chatteris, which is just over our border, which is going to be great. And I might talk about transport, about how to get there at a later stage. I know it's mentioned in the papers. That's really, really important. I just wondered, just for clarification, the additional 150,000 on the top of the 100,000, is that going back into that apprenticeship hub? Is that about capacity for within that service, or is that additional capacity for other things in the area?
So what we're proposing is, because it's we want to ensure that the Chatteris Centre is successful and has a successful launch. The funding that's been allocated to it so far is capital funding. So and then in terms of revenue funding, there will be funding from employers and apprenticeship levy and so on and so forth. But in terms of wider adult learning, we want to provide a small amount of money to get the ball rolling. And then the idea is that it would move into our main AEB funding to continue and sustain a flourishing provision at Chatteris. In terms of the second 150,000 that's mentioned, we want to look at inviting proposals for other parts of the
Right.
the region.
Right.
And there's some ideas here that have been suggested, such as strengthening our skills brokerage, and also looking at the way that some of our colleges are working around collaboration, and how might we use small amounts of money to promote cooperation, collaboration and capacity building amongst the wider system.
Chair, is it all right? Yep, sorry. Thank you for information about the level 3. I was just going to, because we had a list of the courses that will be running, and I was just wondering, when you're talking about growing capacity, is that to infill those existing courses, or were you thinking of diversifying and do a different courses? Because I don't really understand why there has been such a low uptake. I suspect there's a momentum to be driven here rather than a lack of interest. So, and then I've got a question on the innovation, if that's okay, Chair.
I've got Ray and
I know, yeah. Yeah.
So, yes, let's take that one and then we will come back
Okay,
to you.
that's really kind, thank you.
Yes, so shall I take the level 3?
3, yeah.
So the first bit around existing courses. So you will have noted that we are putting some money into marketing of the offer and ensuring that all citizens and businesses are aware of the offer. So it's about so that's where the infilling of existing courses comes in terms of how do we promote them, how do we disseminate the offer, and then in terms of the other bit is around is around capacity building in terms of getting our existing provider base to deliver more. So there may and in order to stimulate that, we need to provide them with assurance that if they over deliver, that they will be, they will be paid for it, because otherwise the way that providers will plan is they'll cap delivery based on a funding allocation, whereas what we've put in our funding rules is that we will pay for over delivery, but we will to manage that, we'll ensure that we're in regular conversation with them in order to grow the provision. So that's the sort of strategic approach to try and provide the right stimulus to the providers to deliver.
The market, doesn't it? Thank
Yes.
you very much indeed.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Do you want to take your innovation question now?
Sorry?
Do you want to take your innovation question, or was
Well, I don't want to hog the floor. Yes, no.
We've got time, it's fine. So.
Are you sure? Well, I just wanted to say that I'm particularly interested, having no FE provision at all in East Cambridgeshire, and I know we'll talk about East Cambridgeshire, and I know we've discussed that and what the implications of that are. I'm particularly interested in putting down a marker to really look in more detail about the Peterborough City Skills Hub, because I think that innovative approach could be replicated. It's something I'd really like to see in East Cambs. If we can manage to pursue a discussion on that, I think that would be really, really helpful. So that's all I wanted to say, is that East Cambs won't be represented here, but I wanted to make sure that there was going to be a breadth spread because from all of these FEs into East Cambridgeshire. So
just to say on Innovation Fund, there will be an opportunity for providers to submit proposals, so in the finance paper later on, you will have noted that there's been some underspend in terms of the 2020-21 Innovation Fund. So we're in conversation about carry forward for some of those projects. But in addition to that, there's the £500,000 for this academic year. So there's definitely an opportunity for development of some new innovation funds, and particularly to address any gaps. And obviously East Cambs, like any other district, also can work with the providers to submit a proposal that meets the local needs.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Liz. Just to say that I think that the gap in FE provision is in East Cambridgeshire is something that we really need to focus on.
Yes.
I think it's a real problem.
Priority. Yes, thank you.
Ray.
Thank you very much. I'm bringing questions from Lynn, who I'm representing. So one of the things that she wanted to make me to say is that you need to remember level 1s and 2, because there are lots of children not reaching those, and we just need to keep an eye on this, not just level 3, and also the T levels. In level 1, who are the providers, please, for the specialist curriculum? Is that for specific schools, or what way is that going to be done, or is it just thematic?
Yeah, so just...
Parminder, can I just say, can you make sure that the microphone is close enough to you, because apparently the people who are listening online can't hear us, and I think that applies to all the councillors as well. It's a nice room for us to be in, but we need to remember there are people listening online, so thank you.
So if I take that level 1 question, and hopefully people can hear. So in terms of level 1 provision, all of our providers at the moment, in particular our local authority providers and our colleges, offer level 1 and below provision. And in fact, 50% ballpark of our AEB is invested in level 1 and below. We also have a flourishing level 2 offer as well. The bulk of it delivered through colleges and our local authority providers.
Thank you. But it says who are the providers? If I've been asked to ask who are the providers for the specialist curriculum.
So by specialist curriculum, do you mean in terms of different subjects, or do you mean in terms of...
It's in the theory 1, if you look, theme 1. If you look in it, it says it's going to be a specialist provided by specialists, and it would...
In terms of commissioning of new providers. Yeah. So in terms of commissioning of new providers, when we're talking about the independent training providers, not... So in terms of the grant-funded providers, who are our local authorities and our colleges, we have a different process in terms of negotiating a plan for delivery with them. In terms of our independent training providers, and the nuance here is the type of funding agreement that they have, who are on a contract for services, it's that provision that will be procured, not the grant provision, if that makes sense. So not the provision that is with the colleges and the local authorities.
I have another question on what period are you looking at for this? Is it going to be over the school year or the financial year? Because if it's financial, it can be actually very hard to, or school year rather, it's going to be very hard over 3 months or whatever it is to get that delivered.
So the commissioning will be for 2020 to 23 academic year. The commissioning will commence after we've received the approvals from the November Skills Committee and then Combined Authority Board. And the delivery will not commence until the new academic year. So we always commission on an academic year basis, but obviously to the Combined Authority Board we report on the budget on a financial year basis. Just to confuse everybody on that nuance.
That's okay. Thank you very much for that.
Just to follow up on that question, the paragraph that I think Ray was referring to referred to 2 providers who have been commissioned to date. I'm just wondering whether, if you could tell us who those were, that might be helpful.
Yes. So in terms of so I think it was the March Skills Committee where the light touch commissioning approach was approved. To enable us to do specific spot purchasing of provision. So we have commissioned, since the paper was written, we've commissioned 4 providers actually. So it's and they are referenced later on in one of the annexes. So it's the College of Animal Welfare in Huntingdonshire that's been commissioned, and GNR Training, who are a specialist provider looking at rail engineering. That have been commissioned. We've also commissioned marshals to do engineering, and there is a specialist provider in Cambridge City that does construction that we've also commissioned as well.
Thank you. I think that's really helpful. Thank you very much. Eileen.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 questions as well. My first one is it's really a comment. Actually, it's about focusing on green jobs. Whether this could be a theme running, this could be a thread running through all the themes of the various skills facets, not just adult education, but if we're all going to go towards zero carbon, I think there needs to be more of a focus on green jobs, and I wondered whether we could have a paper that specifically looks at green jobs now and in the future. So more of a focus. My second point was how how this can be used to make up some of the skills that we're obviously lacking at the moment post-Brexit, with people complaining about empty supermarket shelves and GPs not getting the vaccines and not being able to take blood tests. How can we make sure that we're making up for those skills that are lacking? Thank you.
Would you like me to just add my comments?
It's a bit of a difficult one.
I think they're probably slightly outside Parminder's remit and the remit of this paper. In terms of a paper on green jobs, I think that probably is something that we could take up under the, I mean, it should be on the, we should have brought it up under the agenda plan perhaps, but I think it is something that we could potentially ask for some work to be done on about how the combined authority is planning to support that.
This is something I'm quite often asked, what
are we doing?
What's happening about green jobs, skills for green jobs? Yeah.
So I mean, I don't think it's for Parminder to say whether we can have that on the agenda, but I don't see any objections from anybody else on the committee to putting that down on a future agenda to have a paper reporting on that.
Thank you.
And on the Brexit and skills shortages issue, I mean, that's something that runs across all of our work. I don't know whether you want to comment on that, John.
Yeah, actually, I was, yes, absolutely. We could do a green jobs paper, and of course we could do a Brexit paper. Although we are looking at the skills strategy later on in this meeting, so actually maybe the better place for it would be at the heart of the skills strategy rather than deal with it separately. Green skills should feature as perhaps a chapter or a special theme within the skills strategy when Fliss and Parminder bring it to you in November. In January, the combined authority is creating a combined strategy that's got the refresh of the industrial strategy, the economic COVID recovery strategy, the skills strategy, and the Brexit response strategy. So we could pick up on those skills that are to do with Brexit and lorry drivers and HGVs in that element of that bigger strategy as well as within the skills strategy. So I'm suggesting bind it into the skills strategy. Yeah.
Thank you. I just had one more little question. It's about the underspend. How confident are we that we're not going to have another underspend?
In terms of 2020-2021
yes,
academic year, we will have an underspend, and you'll also note that we do hold some of our funds back in order to, because we're trying to create a responsive system rather than lock funds into an academic year cycle, and there's always going to be a small underspend because we're holding funds back. However, we will be going back out to providers in January once we've had this year's enrolments come through to see whether there's opportunity for growth amongst our providers. So we'll be able to report more accurately then.
Okay, it's just that since I've been on this committee, we've had an underspend every year, and it's and I'm worried about with the new government proposals about appointing providers, that those underspends might work against the combined authority.
One of the reasons why we had the light touch commissioning process approved was because we wanted to bring in additional capacity to address some of the underspend, but also to ensure that the provision was focused on skills needs. So in addition to our existing family of providers, we're hoping that the new 5 or 6 providers that we'll bring in will help to absorb some of the underspend. But yes, I share your concern about ensuring that we deliver the maximum impact for the funds in order to lobby for further investment.
Thank you. John, do you want to comment on the underspend at all?
Must be mind reader. Well, maybe it's my body language. Yeah, I think, could you give the committee an assurance that that your strategy to get additional providers is specifically designed to not have an underspend in 2022-23 for the year you're about to commission? Are you aiming not to have an underspend in the year ahead of us?
We're aiming to ensure that we have maximum, impact in terms of the delivery. That is the aim. But at the same time, we've got to be cognizant of the capability of some of our providers, and it's also about pushing providers to deliver courses that are going to make a greater impact as well. But I think all of the funding flexibilities that we've discussed previously, I think will help providers in order to utilise their funding. So a number of flexibilities and other measures, new providers have been brought in. So we've had a period of significant activity, and this year is the first opportunity to see what the impact of those policy changes are going to be on this particular issue around ensuring that we do spend, because obviously if we don't spend, then, as you say, there's a question, are we receiving too much funding for need? And that's certainly not the case when you look at some of the skills issues.
Parminder, do you, as somebody who's comparatively new to this committee, I've been asking these questions as well, and I might try and summarise what I think is some of the explanation for this, and if I get it wrong, please feel free to interrupt me. But I think that part of the reason we have an underspend is that we have been asking the providers how many courses they've actually provided, rather than just giving them the money and then not checking on what got done. So that if this hadn't been devolved to us, the providers would have had the same amount of money, and then nobody would have known whether those courses were delivered or not. So there wouldn't have been an underspend because the money just goes, but there wouldn't have been additional courses either. And that part of the reason that we're seeing an underspend is that we are asking how many of those courses have actually been delivered, and when they haven't been delivered, we've counted that as an underspend and we've put it into this fund, and therefore that will then be used to increase provision in other areas. So I think that the case that we would need to be making really clearly to government is that this underspend doesn't reflect a reduction in the number of courses or a difference in the number of courses. It represents a more accurate measurement of the number of courses and making sure that we're not paying for courses which aren't actually delivered. So I hope that's a useful explanation for other people like me who are quite new to this. And if I've got any of it wrong, John, shout.
That's helpful, because that's a value for money explanation. And also, I was always quite concerned about the lack of the funding for non-qualification adult education and like evening classes, which perhaps don't lead to qualifications and don't lead to actual jobs, but actually get people more ready for work. And I think that's quite important as well.
I think it is, and I think that that's the pre-level 1 stuff that Parminder was referring to in his answer to Ray. Ray, I think you've got another question at this point, and then I'll come to Ray and then David.
Yeah, sorry, thank you very much. Just on what you were saying about the environment, I think we need to start educating the residents on the understanding of the benefits of the green as well. I think so. I'm with you there. But if you look at 3.6. It's innovative engagement piloting schemes, and it says continuing funding for a small number of successful products from 2020 to 2021 that require additional year of funding. Well, my understanding of a pilot is that you get a particular time and you get a funding package, and you evaluate it after that time. So if it needs more time and then more funding, then maybe when you looked at it the first time, they hadn't priced themselves right. So can you call that successful? And do you need to put more funding into something that maybe hasn't worked yet?
Can I reply to that?
Absolutely.
I think it's a bit more nuanced than that because of the pandemic. So because of the lockdown, some of the colleges were closed, and then therefore they were unable to deliver. So I think some of it is about ensuring that they are able to have a full the full timeline that they had initially envisaged to deliver some of those projects. So some of it is I guess it's a pandemic legacy, and then some of them are what they're delivering has been successful, and it's about scaling up in order to mainstream what they're doing. So that's why we wanted to leave that there, because there's evidence that more could be done. If you like, a stage 2 of what they were delivering is to have that option rather than just pull the rug from underneath some of the projects.
Yeah, if I may. Yeah, it was just my understanding from what was in the paper that this is the project. It needs longer time and it needs more funding to do what was originally set out. It doesn't say this project has been successful. We need to have more time to go on to the next stage, and that's going to need more funding.
The evaluation is underway at the moment, so I probably will be able to say more once that piece of work's been done, to answer the specific points that the council has raised, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, fine. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Yeah, just a little comment on the underspending. Really, one of the things could be lack of identifying opportunities for spending, which is one of the main things. In the paper, we talk about, for example, at Chatteris, the Stainless Metalcraft Training Centre, identified their additional funding required and given, 100,000 I believe it was. Stainless Metalcraft are actually the parent company, Avingtrand, also till recently owned Peter Brotherhoods, for example, in Peterborough. Do they have a training centre? Have we identified that? There are other people that have training centres. Maybe if we identify the training centres, the funding could be given, and then your underspend problem could, in fact, be alleviated. It's just a comment I make. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure that the underspend is really a problem. I think we're managing. We'll find good use of it. But I think the point about, Parminder on the other point.
Yeah, if I can just add that, just to reiterate that actually, the underspend is actually a nice problem to have, because we're actually some of the underspend has arisen from funding that we've recovered as well. So it is as it's a value for money thing, and it's also efficiency of the system. So, but I take on board the point that you're making about about how can we engage other employers that are engaged in training.
I think providers are very generous, and we don't want to put off future providers by not giving them value for money. That's what I'm trying to get at, and identifying other opportunities of maybe spending that money wisely. So, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions on this paper? I don't see any. At which point we'll go to the recommendations, and the Skills Committee is invited to recommend recommendations A to D as laid out on the paper. Is everyone happy to take those en bloc and by acclamation? I don't see any. I haven't heard of any dispute to the recommendations or any concerns. So, if that, could we have a proposer and a seconder for those? Okay, I'll take Liz as proposer and Eileen as seconder, and we'll take that. If there are no objections, we'll take that as unanimous. Okay, are you happy with that? Yeah, lovely. Okay, thank you very much. So the next item on the agenda, I think, is 3.1 Growth Works Management Review, and that's Alan Downton. And Fliss, by the look of it. Hooray, welcome, Fliss.
Good morning, Skills Committee. Great to see you and meet you in person. My name's Alan Downton. I'm the SRO for the GrowthWorks contract. Because the skills service line is so important and a large element of the GrowthWorks, Fliss is in attendance. Nigel Parkinson isn't in attendance today, so apologies there. The reporting we are talking about today is on performance up to the 31st of July 21, which is Q3. And if I could just state that Q3 period is between July and September, so the Q3 period isn't actually complete. The overall performance is robust, and the pipelines for each service line are looking very strong. I'm just going to step through each of the service lines. So from a growth coaching point of view, that's going very well, and there are no concerns with this particular service line. On the inward investment, it has, we're doing incredibly well there actually, and the performance is, and the client base is tremendous. We've actually got 23 active clients in the pipeline at the moment, and I'll come back to that shortly. We've recently run a successful inward investment supply chain for life sciences, which the Mayor was at, which is in the paper. The next one is in the autumn and will probably be in the Fens or Peterborough, and it will focus on AI. In terms of the inward investment, that we have a resourcing capacity issue in that the inward investment service line has only got 2 employees. If I could just make it very clear that there are plans afoot to address that. So we won't be letting any clients down, and it's of key importance that we focus on that. In terms of grants and equity, we are £500,000 behind profile, but this is purely down to the investment appraisal panel only meeting in July, and due to annual leave commitments in August hasn't taken place, but there will be monthly meetings from this month onwards. So we don't see that being a particular problem, and actually the pipeline for that, we've got some great companies coming forward for that particular service line. I'm now going to hand over to Fliss just to talk through the skills.
Sure. So I am the SRO responsible for the skills side of the growth service, and to date we are performing and we are exceeding our targets. You'll note that the numbers are quite small to start off with, and that is deliberate, and I'll just remind you that over the course of the project we are looking to create 1,400 apprenticeships, 1,700 additional learning outcomes, and also engage with hundreds of businesses too. So whilst the numbers are small to start off with, that's to make sure that we're engaging with the providers, engaging with employers, to therefore what we're trying to do is change the dialogue. So when we're speaking to employers, we're trying to understand what their needs are. So often employers say they don't have the people that they need, but they aren't always able to articulate what those skills are that they need to. So rather than just looking at hard outputs within the first 2-3 quarters, which we are achieving, we are trying to engage with a number of additional employers to change that dialogue, so therefore we will have a greater impact going forward. The digital talent platform, that is a large part of the skills brokerage service. There's still work to be done on that, and we're hoping that that platform will be fully up to speed by the end of September. So in a couple of weeks' time, it does the job, but it could be a lot better and a lot more engaging. You'll probably be aware that through the Growth Works with Skills contract, they are also managing the Careers and Enterprise Company contract, and we have seen a huge turnaround in performance of the CEC contract. We were one of the worst performing LEPs, and we are now within the top 5 of all LEPs within the country. So we are seeing significant improvement in our engagement with that contract as well. So it's a work in progress, but we're also more than achieving our targets, and I am quite excited to see the impact over the coming months and years. Thank you.
Thank you.
In terms of financial performance, it is as the business plan was agreed in March 21, and the financial reporting for GrowthCo itself is reported to the GrowthCo board, which I was in attendance last Wednesday on the 8th of September. In terms of just 3 further things that we're looking forward on now, is there are a couple of elements. One is we are developing, Gately are developing a portal to communicate performance. This is in development as we speak, and we will be looking for user testing. That will mean your good selves will have access to this, local authorities, and we can broaden it out to wherever we want going forward. I will update people in due course on that. Now that the service lines are beginning to deliver results, a key focus for the team and the GrowthCo staff is to look at the qualitative element of each service line. And then finally, we just want to make sure we evaluate and ensure the marketing is reaching all potential high-growth scale-up businesses across the combined area and is it joined up across each of the service lines. so that there is just not one message going out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions on this report? Liz?
Sorry. To Alan, and it's about the GrowthWorks Inward Investment Team's application 4.5 on page 30. Encouraging to see that there were successful companies, but also encouraging to see that some were unsuccessful but still applied. From the economics strategic viewpoint from a district, it would be really useful to know which of those companies that applied that were unsuccessful. Gives us a feel of which companies are interested. There may be others out there that we can support to do this, but unless we actually have a picture of what's coming forward, then we're not quite, we're on the bit of our back foot. I think probably our fault as well, but nevertheless it would be really, really useful.
I can supply that information, but also...
I'm East Cambs, by the way, just in case.
Yes, no, so eight companies were successful out of the 27, but we're giving aftercare. So
exactly.
and Inward Investment Service Line are giving aftercare. So they're actually talking to all those clients, although they may not have been successful, but I can supply that information for you.
But you're doing it that way. We'd like to,
yes, no, that's
to do
fine.
it that
yes.
way. I think
yes.
that's important. And if I could just ask, I'm really interested about the 4.11, which was the 3 shortlisted locations: Alconbury, Lancaster Way and Bourne Airfield, likely to come through September. When do we know which one's got?
I spoke to the company this morning. We're going to hear at some point, but I was hoping we were going to hear this morning. We did talk to them over the weekend, but they aren't willing to let any information out at the moment. So as soon as we know anything, you will hear in due course.
Thank you. I should probably hear it from people screaming in my area if we were going to get it from Lancaster Way. And lastly, I think is for Phyllis. 5.6, page 34. I was aware that there was a discussion between the Chamber, I think, and the new Mayor about the work experience programme over the summer holidays. And I'm absolutely delighted that there's going to be these events. When are we going to get more detail about what they are, and how can we collaborate on that to ensure that they are successful? Because obviously schools are back now, but they're pretty loath to send them out on work experience at the moment.
Yeah, so a number of these events have already taken place, but the one with the Chamber is going to be taking place later on in September. So we've been working with the National Careers Service, with Reading Partnership, who are delivering the Restart programme. I'm trying to think of everyone. We've worked with DWP on a Kickstart event, so there's been a number of events that have run over the summer, and we've seen mixed interest. I think there is a bit of webinar fatigue, if I'm honest. So we are looking to run the work experience event with the Chamber probably in a couple of weeks' time, and then we've also got the one with NCS in 3 weeks' time as well. What we want to do is take forward work experience rather than just have a quick, sharp intervention over the summer. We've decided to take a year-long view and therefore try and encourage businesses throughout the whole of the year to engage in offering work experience placements.
So is this school-aged children, or are we talking about post-18 as well?
So we are looking at both, and if we also have a community renewal fund bid, which is looking at funded internships, that will be for 18 plus, but also looking at work experience, so the whole range.
And help on the ground, could you let us know?
Perfect, will do.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions on this paper? Aline.
So this is just a question for clarification. On the dashboard, the red, the top leading indicators, grants and equity, the red arrow, could you just explain that, please?
That's to do with the £500,000. So we've got a large pot of money to do for grants and equity. We distributed a significant amount of that up to the 31st of March. We've got about a significant pot left. We held an inward investment panel an appraisal panel for the equity and grants in July. They haven't met in August, and that's why we're slightly behind. But we've got a great pipeline of clients coming forward. And so the 500,000 that were behind profile will soon be consumed.
Okay, thank you. It was just for clarification. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't see any further questions. I think it's great to hear how well Growth is doing. Don't know what that was for.
Push the purple button.
Clearly the answer is don't press the purple button. Thank you very much. It is good to hear how well the project's doing, and yeah, we'll be looking forward to future reports. So thank you very much for your report. Do we need to vote on that one? No, we just note and comment. Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. I'm just trying to find the right bit of my agenda because I'm scribbling on papers. Okay, noted. Thank you. Okay, excellent. So next is the Employment and Skills Strategy update with Fliss Miller. Again, thank you, Fliss.
I'm so sorry, you're going to be sick of hearing my voice by the end of this committee. It's one after the other, so apologies. Hopefully we'll keep you engaged. So the purpose of this paper is for members to note the progress made on the development of the Employment and Skills Strategy. Today I'm joined by my colleague Fiona Tuck, who is with Metro Dynamics, who are supporting the Combined Authority on the development of the Employment and Skills Strategy. Fiona's going to talk about the progress that we've made to date, but firstly I'd just like to make a few points before we go into the more detail there. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you. We listened. You do not have your final employment and skills strategy today. Very grateful for the suggestion that we should take more time, and so we have done. So thank you. Second, I also wanted to note that the engagement sessions that we held were really positive, actually, and thank you for all your input into those sessions too. Reassuringly, we had many of the same themes, comments come up time and time again, which kind of hopefully indicates that we're heading in the right direction. I'm sure Fiona will talk about it, but the talk of the impact of Brexit, post-COVID, the green skills will all be cross-cutting themes that will be writ large throughout all of the employment and skills strategy going forward. So hopefully we will have the key themes and issues that we need to covered in that. And there's 2 points where I'm going to hand over to Fiona. One, John's already mentioned today. So we have a slight change of direction in the fact that we are now developing the employment and skills strategy, and that will become part of the integrated wider strategy, as John's already alluded to. So whilst we'll come back in November with the final draft, this will then become part of the integrated strategy going forward. We are currently revisiting what our engagement sessions are going to look like. We did say that we were going to go back out to all of the district councils with principals and a number of different groups, but because we're now embarking on this wider piece of work, we just want to make sure that we're not wasting people's time, and so therefore we might go back on a wider engagement rather than just a skills strategy. But I just want to assure you that the focus will still be there, just dependent on how we take that forward. And just to note that we do need to have the final draft strategy coming back in November, because we also have to update our local skills report, which is a requirement by the Skills Advisory Panel that needs to go to the DFE, the Department for Education. I speak in acronyms all the time, and that has to be submitted in January 2022. So we will bring the final draft back to you in November. So that's kind of like all the mechanics around it. So now I'm going to pass you over to Fiona, who will have a lot more interesting things to talk about, I'm sure.
Thank you. And I'm just to echo Fliss's thanks to everybody, particularly a number of faces in this room who I know I saw via Teams over September when we had those engagement sessions. Thank you. So as Fliss said, I'm just going to highlight some of the key emerging findings. You've had the pack, and a lot of you are part of producing the findings, so I won't dwell on it and allow you to have the time instead for a discussion or any questions that you've got. So as Fliss said, we're mid-process, but it was a really positive process of discussion that we had with everybody, and there was a really pleasing level of agreement and consensus on the things that we should be looking at as an area, which is no mean feat given the distinctive profiles that there are of the different places within the area, but there was real good agreement on where there were issues and where there were strengths and things that we need to address. We came out with a very much agreed on set of short-term imperatives for action, some of which are already being addressed, which I'll come on to in a few moments, and then things that are kind of larger term change projects that people wanted to start seeing progress on, but that would really lead out for things that are, not to use a hackneyed phrase, but more like generational change. How do we want to do things differently? And particularly when we're looking at a 2050 target for net zero, how does this look like going forward? But recognising that we have a short-term cycle of strategic planning to work through. There was no great rejection of the skills strategy that's there currently. There are some really strong and important parts in that. It was more about greater resolution in some of those and thinking about how exactly these new things that have happened since 2019, COVID, Brexit, levelling up, intensification of net zero, and the ongoing digitalisation and automation agenda, how they feed in and how we reflect those. And there have already this morning been some points that are following through, like having a green jobs emphasis in the strategy. What does that mean? What does that look like for different sectors? In terms of the things that came out in the kind of traditional SWOT analysis that we did, we can see very much that there's strong economic performance across the area. The priority sectors are strong and they're growing. That's not necessarily wide enough or deep enough across all of the areas. There are some particular places, Fenland, Peterborough, Huntingdonshire, for example, where there have been lower employment increases in those priority sectors. And actually one of the things for emphasis as we move forward is how do we look at those occupations which are priority occupations but not necessarily part of those priority sectors? How do we bring some better emphasis on those in terms of the planning? Linked to that, the occupational structure varies quite a lot across the different places. We see Fenland particularly is very different to the other areas, and it's important to think about how we might address that. East Cambs similarly. And there really does need to be some emphasis on how you structure those resolutions in a different way. And one of the things that I'll come on to mention shortly is, for example, AIUP, how that works more effectively across the area, what that might look like in terms of different satellites across the space in order to fill gaps in East Cambs, for example. How might we link up and do those kind of things? In all of that, we see that work-related training remains very important, and there's a lot of work to do there, but increasingly about knitting that up and looking at progression across people's working lives. How does someone start, develop, learn and grow in this area and have that thriving career as well as business in this space? We see still that manufacturing is really driving productivity at the moment. It's really strong in Peterborough particularly. But there is the obvious pull to Cambridge in terms of those are the really professional and knowledge-based businesses. How can we make sure that we have those balanced together and really make sure that that draw to Cambridge is able to deliver back around? There was some particular emphasis on this as we talked about the levelling up agenda across the area, and that it was really important to achieve that levelling up without levelling down at the southern end of the county as well. Final bits, I think, just on key findings. We saw that in some places actually skills progression at level 4 is slipping, not everywhere, but that it's slipping in some places, and that is something to think about. Level 3 growing in most places as a balance. That links back to the point that I made previously about occupational structure, where actually a good third of most of the occupations in the area at the moment are those which require strong secondary general education and a lot of work-related training. So just thinking about that in terms of how we look at that training plan and make sure that we are ensuring that those progression routes through work are there, as well as those high-level entry points for the jobs that exist. So what does that mean in terms of strategic priorities? I'm going to rattle through these because, as I mentioned before, we haven't heard anything really that says we're on the wrong track. It's very much about this is the right direction. We've got the right things in our strategic plans at the moment, and it's very much about calibration. So obvious words and phrases that we've heard already this morning, we'll continue to hear: upskilling and reskilling, absolutely critical, making sure people can move and transition through their careers, and in response to these economic occurrences, for want of a better word, that we have. Access and participation remains really important, improving the estate, ensuring that where the buildings are, they're good quality, ensuring that people can access training in wherever they are, but also through good transport and through these kind of idea of a satellite distribution. Increasing work-based learning, and something actually which came up a bit more strongly this time was careers education within the system. I think that also links back to thinking about how people get their careers education and information, advice and guidance. We had some really interesting but at times heated debate about the extent to which that should be all school-based or about the potential for careers information, advice and guidance to come out of the school system and be accessible in the community setting via parents and that kind of thing, which I think was a really interesting angle to think about as we move forward. I've mentioned the point on priority sectors and how strong they are. There is clearly an emphasis on thinking about how do you look at priority occupations that are not necessarily those that are within the priority sectors and ensure there's some good strategic planning for those, supporting net zero, the critical point of always increasing employer engagement in training design, how do we make sure those things continue to work together. There are also some really interesting points about quality of work and good work, ensuring that there's a real clear understanding of how you make a good job. It doesn't necessarily need to be a level 4 high-end technical skills job, but it needs to be a good job. And then the obviously ongoing points about addressing long-term unemployment, ensuring that particularly those groups quite hard affected by COVID, young people who've struggled to get a foot in the ladder are able to, a foot in the door, sorry, are able to get on the, talking in acronyms, I talk in metaphors, are able to get their foot on the ladder and foot in the door for that first job. Great double act. But without also forgetting then that those things change and actually people are in work for longer. Everybody's working lives will be longer and people will need to transition more and more across their career. So if you are an older worker and you think, actually, I've reached this point, but actually I've got another 20 years ahead of me, still in the workforce, and I want to change now and do something different, how do you achieve that? What do you do? So in terms of action then, and this is really where we are in the process, we've had quite good discussions, we've had quite a lot of time looking at the evidence and thinking, what are our issues, what do we need to address? This next phase of work is now, and it always planned to be, well, what do we do about it? What does that look like? What does acting look like? So this is really the emerging ideas, and that is exactly what this next stage of engagement will be. So you've heard a lot of the ongoing action this morning, and some of the things for short-term action are wrapped up in how growth works looks and acts over the coming period, what the current plans are, the different things that it could do and the different bids that are in train at the moment. Bliss mentioned the Community Renewal Fund bid that's got a lot and key bits in it that are related to skills and training. It's the key fund at the moment that has got any revenue in it, other than like to be able to address these issues. So that will be with all eyes on that to see what happens. Obviously, AEB commissioning, apprenticeship funding, ARUP is key for thinking about how we put different skills across the area and how those FE centres can interact. Other things that have come up and our ideas are things like the All-Age Career Service, sector work academies, there's one in the area but were noted as being really important, the skills bootcamps programmes. There are a lot of things floating around at the moment that over the next few weeks we really want to try and pin down and make sure it's clear how we make best use of those over the next three to 5 years. Thinking more long term, these are much more about that system change point that we made about how if we want to do things differently, what that might look like. There are a few things coming out here and they tend to flow back into a number of different buckets, which at the moment are still buckets rather than contents. But a regional curriculum was something that came up a number of times, this ability for the area to think, what do we need? How do we align our learning, our training, the job opportunities, the careers information, advice and guidance? How do we make it really clear that there are these really exciting and different jobs in different places? You might not necessarily be able to see them, but we've got them and they're here and we can plan that together. An approach that had employers at the centre driving demand, but also wrapped individuals with that too, recognising that employers have a demand for education and learning, but people do them as well. There is a personal demand for different types of learning and how you can make sure you influence that at the right points. The really important role of parents and other people in your family group as influencers came upon it a number of times. And this is particularly where people became quite clear about how you can do that careers education and information piece outside of the school setting so that you're reaching all of those people too. There is no natty metaphor or acronym for this yet, but coordinated place-based action areas came up as something. They were either opportunity areas, was the model that was mentioned at the moment, but the idea of a need for a grouping that can bring together the different agencies that are addressing multiple, often complex issues and be able to work either very hyper-locally or across a whole area came across a number of times. when we were looking at things like the index for multiple deprivation, people were very clear to say that actually there are some pockets of very deprived areas in the south of the county that do need action. It's not the whole local authority, but actually there are some smaller places, whereas you move further north and there are wider areas. So some way of putting together that kind of action area grouping that can flex depending on the size and scope of the area that it needs to address. And then final point on that long-term change was thinking about how do we look at the system itself for education and training? Can we make it dual track? Can we make it anticipate and respond at the same time? So there is that broader stretch of this is what our economy needs, kind of looking to the future, looking at the horizon, what is coming up for our priority sectors, how do we keep ahead of the game, but at the same time, how do we have a bit that can react and respond very quickly and very rapidly to the needs of employers and people on the ground. I'm northern, so I've gone through that really quickly. I apologise for the speed of my delivery. But that was my last point, and happy to take any other questions.
Thank you very much for a very thorough update, and it's very good. It's really good to hear about just how much work and thinking has gone on so far. We did encourage you not to rush back to us, but there's clearly been a huge amount of work done over the summer and in the interim period, and it's really good to hear how the kind of key themes that are coming out of that. That's fantastic. I don't see hands rushing. Yes, I've got Ray, and then Eileen.
Thank you. I've been asked to ask a few questions. First of all, what about the wider learning from Pat Carrington's thesis, which is around social, culture, symbolic and human? So it's the wider area. On 3.3, it's can the elected members and officers be included in that, the 8 programmes? But when you go through, there are a couple of things like the word worklessness, which is very, for me, it's not a word we should be using. We need to put something different in that. And then there's a couple of things where they say not yet proven. So it's about the university in Peterborough, for instance. It says not yet proven. Well, it's not finished being built yet, so it can't be proven. So, but there are people that are going to go in there who have got proven abilities and records that we hope can actually be used. There are a number of other things, but I don't want to take up too much time from you. So, when we look at, where is it now? Boot camps. Is this is a boot camp? Is that the whole of East Anglia, east of England, or is it just?
Yes, it is. That's on a later paper, though, the boot camp. So I'll come back to that if that's all right.
No problem. I heard it mentioned, so I thought I was going to ask it here as well.
Yeah, that was good.
No, that's fine.
Okay, so first point on the work that Pat's taken forward. Great work. I know there's a pilot going on at the moment. So at the moment, we haven't committed to any actions at all, but obviously Parminder is on the working group for that, so it's something we're very aware of the combined authority, and of course we'll be acknowledging that when we go forward. Term worklessness, yes, this is something that came up. We have debated a number of different terms. We can't find a term that people are comfortable with, so we will carry on with that. If anyone has a good idea of what that should be called, then that would be great. Understand the negative connotations that are associated with that word. So point taken, and we will continue to work on that. In terms of, we're very much about measuring impact, and so with the University of Peterborough, or ARU Peterborough, it's absolutely not saying that it's not a good thing. 100% it is a good thing. Can we demonstrate the impact of that yet? No. And so therefore it's something that's in the journey, and we hope by the end of the next academic year, we will see the impact. But at the moment, it is not yet proven. So we can look at the terminology. This is only just in a presentation to update you on where we are, but it's just saying we haven't seen the final outcome of the university as yet.
I'd like to emphasise that point about using words like unproven on the university, because we've currently got 20 million in with government for phase 3. We're about to bid for another 20 million in Wisbech for an outreach centre in Wisbech for the university. So what we don't need is our strategy to be saying the university is unproven when we're asking government for 40 million at the moment. So
in progress.
Yeah. Just need to make sure that the words don't shoot us in the foot.
Yep. Point taken. Noted.
Thank you. Just to come back to work listeners, it was a very good beverage word. I was just wondering, my son was involved some years ago when he was in primary school and secondary school in a study that looked at how, I think it was mainly boys, became disaffected with education, and the corollary, you know what I mean, of that is that they become disaffected with gaining qualifications and then getting skilled work. So I was wondering if any thought has been given to doing work with children in primary schools, because quite often that's where the aspirations are deadened, and people don't go on to understand about getting skills and qualifications, and that they can improve their employment chances. So I know a lot's being done in secondary schools in career choices, but I wonder whether that, in some cases, that's too late, especially where we've got areas of deprivation like Finland, whether there is any way of starting much younger to raise those aspirations.
Chris? Yeah. Totally agree with you. So at the moment we only have funding for secondary schools, but one of the things that we want to take forward as part of the all-age career service is not only looking upwards in terms of age, but also seeing if we can gain some funding to have interventions at primary school. Totally agree with you. I come from a university background and we recognise the need and did a lot of work in primary schools. So yeah, if we can do, very much where I would like to be.
Thank you. Rosie.
Thank you. It's a very interesting report. This is my first time here, so I've got a lot to learn, and I'm very pleased that you recognise the importance of careers advice. And following on, also I wonder how much will be, I agree that it should be for young people and certainly in school, but I wonder about older people as well, because obviously many more people change career now. And I just wonder, there seems to be also a bit of a theme for further education and post-16 issues. In Cambridge there's high levels of people doing A-levels, but it seems that in many of the districts there's a real issue around those other subjects, and obviously you're going to have the change to T-levels. Do you have any idea of what impacts you think that will have? Because obviously if we're not in such a good place now and there's a big change, there's a chance of going backwards before we go forwards. So sorry, that was two questions sort of rolled into one.
Yeah, okay, so I think I've got them. Sorry, am I okay? Yeah. So yes, the National Careers Service is looking to be re-procured, and we are looking to see whether or not that is something that we can bring providers together to therefore join up that. So therefore, yeah, very much. We're very conscious, especially what Fiona was talking about. We're working longer, and so therefore we need to make sure that we're not excluding any demographics from having good quality careers advice. So yes, very much all the way through. It's something that I'm very passionate about, and I want to make sure that we have the right offer for all of our residents. And then in terms of T-levels, so we are working with those providers who will be the first who come on board to deliver T-levels. We're looking at some capital investment, but also looking at how we can look at the transitions and also the progression, making sure that our young people are getting the right advice in schools, but then also at the same time working with employers too, because obviously there's an industry placement that needs to go alongside it. So yes, we're working with providers, working with individuals and schools, probably need to do a bit around parents to make sure they're aware of what it is, and then also with employers, and then speaking with the principal at ARUP to make sure that we have the right progression from T-levels too, so the tariff points and entry into the qualifications there. So it's certainly work that we're very aware that we need to be moving on, and there are plans afoot to make sure that we take that forward. But you're right, with every transition, every change in education, with the BTECs and, you know, phasing out, we need to make sure that we're working with our providers to make sure there is appropriate provision across the area.
Can I just follow up on that one to flag up the kind of major concerns that there are around apprenticeships, with apprenticeships having fallen very significantly at the start of the pandemic. They fell before that with the introduction of the apprenticeship levy, so that apprenticeships are now, I think, kind of almost half as many as they were 2 or 3 years ago, which is a really major concern, I think, for a very large number of people, and I think that it needs to be a key priority for the Combined Authority, for our skills strategy, and across the whole system, to try and rebuild that route into education, and make sure that it's not just perceived as something that 16 or 18-year-olds might be thinking about, but a pathway that leads you all the way through, that can be started at any point, at any age, and lead on to degree-level apprenticeships. Even though we might not be supporting those, they do exist, and there are lots of opportunities for them. So I think making sure that that particular sector is something that we're supporting, I'm sure will be at the heart of this, but I just wanted to flag up just how crucial that is, because I think it's... Other questions on the paper? Yeah, Rosie.
Me again. Could I just add one thing on that? Something that's difficult for older learners is you need an income. You may have family, may have other dependents, and I just think that needs to be included in that discussion. Obviously, often it's just about how much does it cost to do the training, but you often need more support.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the reasons why apprenticeships are such a key potential route for older people as well as for younger people. And but there are real issues about employers being willing to pick up that burden is the wrong word, but to make sure that they're using that opportunity as well as they could be, and getting the support that they need in order to bring apprentices forward. I think it's a huge issue. Any other comments? No. In which case, thank you very, very much for your very thorough report, Fiona and Fliss. And it's noted, so I don't think we need but we're very much looking forward to that coming back to our meeting in November. Just before we finish, I hope it was also noted the comment earlier about the green skills jobs part of that strategy, which it would be helpful to have a separate section on, just to make sure that it's getting as much clarity and focus as it needs. Liz.
The fact that, I don't know where it belongs to, but the fact that our care leavers are now going to have a bursary. May I thank everybody who was involved in that. That is going to be a huge step forward for them. So I just wanted it noted how grateful we are from the committee that this has happened.
Thank you, absolutely. Wonderful. Fliss, I think you're probably staying there again.
So we'll move on. I'm so sorry.
No, it's great. We love having you there. So the next one is the Careers Hub, so if you could take us through that. Just before you do, I'm freezing. I don't know whether anyone else is. I don't know whether it's possible for somebody to go and turn the air conditioning down slightly. Thank you.
Okay, so this is a good news paper, I think. So therefore, this is around the Careers Hub. And members are just asked to note the report that was taken to the Combined Authority Board on the 30th of June. I'm not going to take you through all of the recommendations. You will have been able to read them yourselves, but all of those recommendations were approved. So I am delighted to say that the Combined Authority was successful in their application to the Careers and Enterprise Company contract to secure the funding for the first Careers Hub which is now actually in effect for the academic year 21 to 22. The Careers Hub will include 30 schools and colleges from across the whole of the combined authority area. And I just wanted to emphasise as well that we've kept all the schools that were in the OA area. They will be in the hub because they're used to that additional support. But rather than go for the north or the south, we've made sure that we have a good spread across the whole of the combined authority. And you'll note that Peterborough College and also CRC, Cambridge Regional College, are also going to be part of that Careers Hub too. So it brings additional funding and it brings dedicated resource. We have recently appointed the new strategic hub lead, and they will start next Monday, actually. That's come around really quick. And then you'll also note that a member of my team was also due to TUPE across to GrowthWorks with Skills. I'm delighted to say that that has gone through smoothly, and my member of staff is now with GrowthWorks with Skills and has, I would say, not very eloquently, landed very softly and has been welcomely received. I think it's an exciting time for careers across the region. We're bringing together employers more closely with our schools. And as I said in my previous report, performance is improving. And so that can only mean good things for our young people and also schools too. I'm not going to talk any more at this point and will invite questions.
I do apologise, but I do have some questions along these lines. So, on page 73 it says the growth of Peterborough is higher, but Peterborough and Fenland are different. All the areas are so diverse, and so you need to kind of just justify things in the particular areas rather than just a blanket. This was a question that was put to me to ask, and talk about the younger in Peterborough and the different ethnicity in Peterborough. They have different needs in the future. Have I jumped on?
I don't know what part you're referring to. Sorry, I don't have the page numbers.
Right, sorry, I've missed it. I've got it in the wrong place. I do apologise.
Any other questions on the Careers Hub? I'm just wondering, Fliss, whether you might, because there are some new members around and people may be watching, could you give us a little bit of an outline about what actual actions the Careers Hub's going to be expected to do, whether it will be doing events in schools and or whether it's going to be largely online or a mix of both, that sort of thing?
So the careers, basically the funding, the additional funding that we get through it's a virtual careers hub, so there isn't a building. And what it brings is additional funding. So we have the dedicated person who will, the strategic hub lead, and they will be working with all of the schools, all of the careers leaders to therefore make sure that we have more targeted resource available to all of the schools and colleges too. We already have enterprise coordinators, but they will have more time of the enterprise coordinator as well. So therefore, that will hopefully bring about more interventions, more businesses involved. If you're a school within the Careers Hub, there are harder targets. So the Gatsby benchmarks, they will have to achieve higher percentages throughout the Gatsby benchmarks as well. So therefore, they will have more support to help all of the careers leaders to achieve this. So there's more support to therefore hopefully mean that they perform better, have more interventions, more interactions with businesses, to therefore create a better careers offer for all our young people.
Brilliant, thank you. That's helpful. So it's clearly it's an online resource that's going to support the kind of additional engagement with that specific
hours,
set of schools,
time,
more hours and more time.
And it will be we will be creating face-to-face, but also virtual support too.
Thank you. That's helpful. Eileen.
Just a point of clarification again. So that will the actual dealing with the school children, pupils, will that fall on the teachers, or will there be other people to help engage with the young people?
So it's a bit of both. So therefore, as part of the Careers Hub, part of the network, we have enterprise advisors. So there's somebody from business who is linked to every school. So sometimes they'll go along and do some events, and there'll be some more events where businesses are linked up with the young people. But there'll also be a lot more support for the careers leaders, the teachers as well, to give them more resources and support to take forward the careers programmes.
Thank you. I don't see any more questions on that one. And again, it's for noting. So we have commented on and noted that report. And we'll now move on to digital bootcamps, which is Fliss again. So thank you very much, Fliss, if you could introduce this one.
Yeah, so it's another good news story, I think. So therefore, again, members are just asked to note this paper, which was taken to the Combined Authority Board on the 28th of July. And again, all recommendations were approved. The Combined Authority were successful in their consortium bid to the Department of Education to deliver skills boot camps, and this is across the whole of the east of England, so therefore wider than just the Combined Authority. We have won £1.8 million to deliver the boot camps, which will mean that we should have 805 learners who successfully achieved skills interventions. And the good thing about these boot camps are they're less than 16 weeks in length, so they're very short, they're sharp, but they have to be linked to employers. So everybody that goes on a boot camp will also have access to a guaranteed interview. So the sole purpose of this training is to get people into employment or into better jobs too. We have two providers, so we went in with a larger bid actually, but the Department for Education only awarded us two of our providers, so they are Cambridge Regional College and also an independent training provider, Purple Beard. They've delivered a number of boot camps in other parts of the country and have been very successful. So all the courses are online, so therefore anybody in the region can access them. And there's two distinct types of boot camps that we're taking forward at this stage. So CRC, Cambridge Regional College, have what I would say more generalist IT courses, so looking at Teams and database skills. That doesn't sound very coherent, is it? And then also Purple Beard, they're offering the more technical courses, so your DevOps, your cloud computing. So hopefully we're looking at a range of different technical digital needs to therefore meet the needs of employers and also upskill a range of different individuals across the area. So we're working with other LEPs to make sure that we get the provision wider than just a combined authority as we need to, because that is our contract area package. And then we're working with a number of different providers. Last week I was speaking to over 250 work coaches with Department for Work and Pensions, so therefore making sure that we're engaging with the people in the most need as well. Again, I won't talk anymore and I'll invite questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go first with a question on this one, which relates to the item at 2.8, where it says that there was a delay in the notification of the award, which means that there is now urgency to deliver the contract at pace. Obviously, we need to be getting on with delivering it as quickly as we can and making sure that we get as many people through these boot camps as possible, because that's the best thing to do anyway, because we want to get these people back into work and have the delivery done. But I was just wondering, it would be quite unfortunate if we were not deemed to have been successful with this contract because of the delay, which was not the fault of either of the contractors delivering or of all the fault of the combined authority. So have we made clear to the DFE that that the delay has put us under significant pressure, and that it would potentially be quite helpful if they could take that into account?
We have.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Any other comments? Nope. Just one other. Presumably we'll be getting reports back on the progress on this contract relatively frequently.
Yes.
Not to every meeting, but every what kind of?
I mean, it's a short-term one, so I'm happy to provide very quick updates either to the committee or just in a paper, whatever's best works. More than happy to just provide a one-page summary with participants if that's helpful.
could we have something to come back in January? Would seem like an appropriate time. Rosie.
Thank you. It was just about the 805 learners. Do you have any idea? You said that you'd spoken to the DWP. Do you think that that will be easy to achieve? Do you think there could be lots more people that would be interested? Sort of, where's that?
So we are working, wider than DWP. I think it was just to let you know that that's the scale of people that we're talking to as well. I think it's going to be difficult to achieve the 805 learners within the time scale, because the courses all have to be finished in March, and by nature of the course they're 16 weeks long, so therefore we're looking at many cohorts running concurrently. There is often there's a conversation mismatch, I think, in digital. Everyone hears or says that employers haven't got the people they need with digital skills. But when you engage with employers and try and offer courses, they're never quite right. Short courses, long courses, and so I still think there's a bit of a disjunct between digital skills provision and what employers need. So I'm really interested in, and the providers we're working with are fantastic. So they're offering this course, so it could be a 2-week intensive. It's 3 days a week, 2 hours a time. So we're trying lots of different delivery methods just to see, kind of testing it as well. So we're trying every angle we can and looking at the more general IT to the more specialist. So therefore trying to, test that problem a bit more as well. But I do think it will be quite a tall ask to get those learners through.
Thank you.
The March deadline does sound slightly crazy. So I think if it would be helpful to have a note from this committee to say that if that deadline could be extended in order to make sure that we can continue to bring learners into the programme sort of after 16 weeks before the March deadline, it might be worth writing that with the support of this committee
I will
now.
Always accept help. Yes.
Does anybody object to that? Because it does seem to me that that actually for us to cut off taking new people into the programme 16 weeks before the end of March would be a real shame if it's only just got up and running. So can we take that as an action? Thank you. That would be great.
Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. I think again we've noted the report and I don't see any further comments. So we'll move on to the next one, which is Parminder and Fliss now. So.
Rather than hearing my voice over and over
fine,
again.
We're very happy. So whenever you're ready. And I don't know who wants to go first.
Okay. Do you want me to introduce? Okay. So this paper sets to inform members of the new legislation that is currently being considered in the House of Lords. The bill sets out the proposals made in the Skills for Job White Paper. In addition to what you have in the paper, I also want to raise a few points. So we have met with the bill team at the Department for Education with our fellow MCA colleagues to discuss the implications of some of the clauses in the bill. As you will have seen in the paper, there are some parts of the bill which perhaps could be seen to weaken, is that the right word? Cut across some of our devolved powers. So therefore, just trying to get assurances from the bill team that this isn't the case and that there won't be any unintended consequences of the bill that they are bringing to take forward. So some of the key points to note include, and apologies, I will read this, a statutory underpinning has been placed on local skills improvement plans, introducing the power for the Secretary of State of Education to designate employer representative bodies to lead the development of the plans. A duty will be placed on colleges and training providers to cooperate in the development and then have regard to these plans too. There will also be a duty introduced to all FE providers to review how they will meet the local needs. There will be new powers for the Secretary of State for Education to intervene where there has been a failure to meet these local needs too. And as discussed in the paper, there will also be a new list for all private training providers to make sure that they get onto the register. Currently, there is no need for any of our AEB providers to be on such a list. We have that devolved power to choose the providers we wish to engage with. But with the new bill, that would somewhat diminish our own autonomy in deciding who we can work with. And one of the points that I guess affects Parminder more than I is the fact that that affects all subcontractors too. And so therefore, if we had providers who were just providing a small provision, even maybe £50,000 per annum, they would still need to go through the same process as your larger providers too. Points less of note, but just things to be aware of because they're going through in the bill as well, is there will be an additional function for IFATE, which is the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education, and they will have a qualification approval process of which providers will need to pay for to have their qualifications approved. Good news in the lifelong loan entitlement, so there'll be 4 years of loan funding where the intention is that people will be able to transfer credits between FE and HE providers, which will hopefully encourage more modular and part-time provision. And there will also be regulations to improve FE teacher training, and this will be more of an enabling clause as well. So the bill really is quite substantive. In the paper, you will see the two concerns that we have as a combined authority. One is that LSIPs, which will replace our local skills report and the skills advisory board, will be led by an employer representative body. Currently, as that stands, that excludes mayoral combined authorities. And the second is for the list or register that will come into force as a result of the bill.
Liz.
I so agree. And I think from this committee we need to be quite clear about what you're saying would cause us issues. We've been, in the past, been given providers that we didn't need and didn't fit our needs, and actually the take-up has been poor, and then there's been no move forward. So, Chair, could I ask you
Absolutely.
To endorse the concerns that we have? I think they are huge, and you're quite right. If you cut out the combined authority and all the work that's being done and leave it in the hands, good they may be, of our representatives from business, they are not in the business of skills in quite the same way we are, and obviously support it and so on. So if we could reinforce what Flish has said, I would be really grateful. I don't know what other people feel.
I think we need to lobby local MPs, because that will come to the House of Commons. And I don't know whether this has been the bill has been drafted with an oversight of what the mayoral authorities are doing, but it does seem to cut across the policy of having mayoral authorities to then that have these devolved powers to then come along and take away those devolved powers. Basically, it's just doesn't make sense.
I think lobbying MPs is a very sensible suggestion. I also had a question about the impact that some of this restrictions on providers and need for going through particular processes will have on willingness of employers to think about apprenticeships. Is it likely to have an impact on that as well?
There's already a separate register for apprenticeship training providers, so therefore that's a separate list, that's a separate register. So no, this would just mean for anybody who was already delivering apprenticeships, they would then have to go onto another register too.
Ray.
So excludes apprenticeships.
Yeah.
Thank you. Very similar, but what about training volunteers to do the things that they do? Do we have to go through anything with them? Or
this providers, so I think this would be separate.
Okay, I think we've had a suggestion that we write to our local MPs expressing our concerns about the impact that this would have on the ability of the combined authority to act in a flexible way to have our own providers who respond to our own local needs. So if I haven't seen any objection from anyone, I'll come to Rosie in a second. But and if you want feedback on that, Rosie, that would be really helpful. But I'm just wondering whether we want to write that from this committee, but also from the board if they're happy to support it, and the mayor. So maybe we can investigate whether there would be widespread support for such a letter to our local MPs. Can we take that as an action, John?
Yes.
Sorry. Okay. Thank you. Rosie.
Thank you. I wholeheartedly agree, and I would just say presumably we're not the only combined authority with this, so also working with other mayors and combined authorities. And as I understand it, they want increased devolution, so sort of giving devolved powers and then immediately taking them away isn't a good way to achieve that.
Okay, thank you very much for the update, and we'll hope to have a report back to the next committee with that letter has gone. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the Employment and Skills Board update, which is Fliss again. Thank you, Paminda.
This is my last one, you'll be glad to note. And very, very short. As you're aware, the Employment and Skills Board meet quarterly. The last meeting that we had was on the 29th of June. 12 members were present, that's excluding officers who were supporting that. The board received a number of updates from officers about the key activities. It was a while since we'd done that, and so it was useful for all board members to be fully up to date on things such as the development of the new university, ARU Peterborough. And we got to see a fly-through, actually, of the new building, which is always good when you can see something and it's tangible, isn't it? So that was a good update. Parminder also brought an update about AEB, talked about the whole role of AEB to therefore make sure that all members were aware and flexibility, so that gives us as well. Alan brought to us an update of the Business Growth Service, Growth Works, and then we also talked about the implications of the skills bill there as well. And then it seems such a long time ago, but we also talked about the approach to the development of the employment and skills strategy, and everybody was in agreement in how we take that forward. And the one thing, I guess, which is really useful to the Employment and Skills Board is we have providers, we have businesses, and we have employer representative bodies too. So therefore, we have the full endorsement of a wider community of people. It was also agreed that we need to strengthen the board, especially with the introductions of the LSIPs, the local skills improvement plans, where the department is rightly so is pushing forward for employers to have a greater voice in the skills agenda too. So we have asked for representatives and they have agreed to join. So we now have, and I haven't got all the correct titles, I apologise. So Professor Ross Renton, inaugural principal at ARU Peterborough, is joining the board. We also have a colleague from the University of Cambridge. Vic Annals from the Chamber of Commerce has agreed to join, and we also have Neil Wood, who I'm afraid I don't know his title, but from Public Health England as well. So therefore we're looking at the health and wellbeing agenda as well as bringing in wider membership. So we're hoping with new invigoration of the board, new members, we'll see some great things coming from that advisory committee going forward.
Thank you. I have a quite quick question, which is that I think it would be really helpful for me to know who was on the board, not just the new members, but the old one. I'm not asking you to tell me now, but if you could just send round a list, that would be, I think, helpful. I don't know whether other members would like that as well. Maybe they all know. But if you could send that to me, that would be great. I think I've got David, and then I'll come to you, John. No? Okay, John.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a supplementary point on connecting the two papers, the one now and the one we've just had, about the local skills plans and the white paper that puts the power into local employer representative groups. And yes, we will absolutely do and take the action to lobby so that the MCA does keep that authority through actually the Employer Skills Board, but we are also, just to give you a heads up, we are also looking at a workaround such that if it does stay the same in the white paper, we can retain control of this committee through the Employer Skills Board, and that might be, which we haven't decided, but we are discussing, it may be making the Chambers possibly the chair of that board. And if they're the chair of the board, it is the Chambers that is represented the body, but everything they would be saying that would approve all of the skills plans of all the colleges would be developed through the Employer Skills Board and through us, so that there is a potential workaround which we're working on.
Thank you. I think that's helpful. I mean, I think it would be desirable if the wording in the bill could be changed, but obviously if we don't succeed with that, we need to make sure that the work that's been undertaken continues, and that we are, I mean, I think that the work of the Combined Authority in this area has been really helpful. Get on with that. I'll just go and find some water.
So members, Vanessa Ainsworth was supposed to have delivered this, but she's isolating because one of her sons has got COVID, so couldn't attend. So the purpose of this paper, every meeting of the Skills Committee, is to provide an update and an overview of the revenue and the capital funding lines. Table 3.1 in your paper has a breakdown of the revenue expenditure, and the points to note on that table in 3.1 are, as Parminder has already covered in his paper, item 2.1, the 667k underspend on the AEB programme, the 220k underspend on the innovation budget. We debated the reasons for that and what Parminder's doing about it. And then, of course, the one that comes up every time is a very large underspend on the healthcare sector work academy, which is reducing, and City College, who deliver that, are in negotiations with DWP to extend their contract in order to be able to spend the money in an extended contract period, and they are confident that they'll be able to get agreement on that. There is also the underspend on the adult education budget of 1076. Excuse me, this is income into the adult education budget. So this is good news. This is £1,076,000 more money, and this relates to a number of additional funding lines that we've had during the year. For instance, further level 3 funding as one example. Feedback either now or subsequent to the committee meeting is our medium-term financial plan. In Appendix 2, you have a forecast of what officers will be making as their ask for the medium-term financial plan to 2024-25. Currently, this has only items in it this year. As you'll see, for instance, the AEB Level 3 courses are 800 forward for asks into the Combined Authority, and the £100 million that the Combined Authority did get approved a couple of weeks ago, £20 million per year for 5 years. We don't have any asks noted here. The reason for that is they will come through the skills strategy, and they will include things like ideas that that Fliss and Parminder are working on in improving the FE estates in order to build capacity for delivery. There is, of course, what's already been mentioned by Fliss, the Careers Education All-Age Careers Hub, which could also go down into primary schools, which was meant to uni proposals, one that's already in, touch wood, we hopefully could be approved this month or next month for phase 3 of the university, which is a second teaching building. And then, as we're in Wisbech now, for a university feeder for the university in Peterborough, but based at the College of West Anglia here in Wisbech, to do level 3, 4 and 5 skills and feed them through into the new university. So lots of additional funding will come onto that MTFP. Some of it will be bid international schemes like the Shared Prosperity Fund and the Levelling Up Fund, and some of it Fliss and Parminder will be putting forward as bids into the Combined Authority. Your feedback is very welcome on other ideas.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any comments on what we've heard? Sounds like it's going to be an exciting meeting in November.
Yeah, hopefully.
Okay, thank you very much. No comments on that, but thank you for the update. That's very helpful. Okay, and no vote is required on that either, and that brings us to the end of this morning's business. So thank you all very much for your attendance and what's been a useful and constructive meeting, I think. And particularly thank you to Fliss, Parminder and Fiona for excellent reports. Yes, absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you all very much. Eileen.
I just wanted to point out on the agenda, I've mentioned it to John, that it says the next meeting is the 10th of October. That's a Sunday. It's the 10th of November.
It is indeed the 10th of November. Thank you very much for pointing that out. Okay, thank you, everybody, and I'll close the meeting at this point. Thank you.